So we're going to look at the differences between intramembranous and endochondral. Intra, once again, inside of a membrane. So what we're going to see is that from this embryonic tissue that we just mentioned, we're going to give rise to some membranes. In those membranes, there's going to be the ability to get material to those membranes that will help them begin to ossify, to harden. So, what we see with the intramembranous, we're given rise to stuff such as the skull bones, mandible, diaphyses of the clavicles, okay? We're going to give rise to what we see as bone. Now, in the beginning, it's the woven bone, but by the time we're done with the ossification process, the goal is to look like the adult skeleton. So, what we say happens, or not say, but what happens, there will be areas in that membrane that are termed centers of ossification. So you'll have areas throughout that membrane, and this is going to allow for ossification to start. A very good example of how this takes place in utero is what we see in the fontanelles of the baby skull. Okay? When you look at the fontanelles, even though we don't see it, but what's there, okay, in this region is a membrane. All right? It's a membrane, and that membrane has like little rocks in it. And those areas are the centers of ossification. For a child, okay, what's it, 3 to 5 years age, their head gets, at that point, whatever the size the head is, that's how big it's going to be for the rest of their life, okay? So if you think about it, the size of your head that you have now, that was the same size of your head when you were 3 years old. Well, about 5 years old. Yeah, I know. Kind of makes you do this number, right? And thinking about it, no wonder I toppled over so much. But in this membrane, if you were able to see it, would be areas that look like rocks. And those are the centers of ossification. And as the child's brain develops, because that's really what it's doing, it's allowing for the growth and the development of the brain. And as that occurs, these bones, because they still have membranes, they get to shift and move, okay? And once that brain growth has stopped, these centers of ossification, which have been busy, okay, they just keep ossifying and ossifying and ossifying until the bones close. And we end up with the adult skull, where there are no more gaps or spaces. And that's what they have until the rest of their body continues to meet the size of their head. Okay? Like I said, children have to grow into their head. All right? So, this intramembranous is what's taking place for that growth process. When we begin to look at the other types of growth, think about the arms, think about the legs, okay? That's going to mostly be the endochondral, because cartilage is present when that baby is born. And cartilage is going to be the blueprint. So if we look at the intramembranous, when we begin to have the development of those germ layers, and we give rise to the membranes that are present, we can see that cells are going to be able to make their way to the membrane. Why? How? What in the world do I mean? How am I going to take that membranous area and then make it become something that's going to be hardened? What cells are going to be present, or what cells can get the chemicals to make this take place? Because at this point, I'm talking very early development. It's just several weeks at the most. At this point, the offspring is mostly what kind of cells? Stem cells. All right, so they got a blood supply though, that chemicals can come in, and if the stem cell gets exposed to that chemical, it identifies what that stem cell is supposed to become. Does that make sense? All right, that's what we mean by the stem cell. Okay, so what we begin to see is movement of materials into the membrane. As we begin to move into the membrane, we begin to have the depositing, okay, the deposition, but that's not the term I want to use, but that's a term, but the depositing of chemicals to make those cells start centers of ossification. And we begin to have the centers of ossification that will spread out. And as they spread out, like I said, for the newborn, all right, they're not going to completely close up the bones. Now, is that always the case? No, okay, because there are certain circumstances where the baby is born with the skull already closed up. All right, that's a very serious problem for that offspring. Okay, craniosynostosis. All right, basically the skull is already hardened. They have to go in and purposely cut and spread those skull bones to allow for the growth of the brain. And still, the children are usually mentally disabled because it leads to just too much pressure and everything on the brain, disruption to the tissue. So this would be our intramembranous. Biggest area where it's so important, of course, is in the skull. The rest of everything else, endochondral. Pretty much most of what the remaining skeleton is going to need to become the adult skeleton. About the end of the 4th week, remember I said it was really early, okay, very early in development. We've already got cartilage that is formed. And we begin to see that in some of that cartilage at roughly 4 to 5 weeks of development, it will start showing ossification. And it doesn't stop until fully grown.
So like our temples, they never like harden? Is that just like?
Your temple area is actually the articulation and the formation between the sinuses and the skull. So this area, as you can see, is a major sinus region. So no, it would never, that would never harden.
Yeah, so it's just like cartilage, I guess, it never.
Not cartilage, because this is all bone. It's the formation of the shape of it.
Okay.
So your temple is not, you know, when you're thinking about your temple, this is the area that you're touching. So this would be just behind that eye socket, right there at your cheekbone, with this dip into the sinuses. Yeah. Now the bone back here is hardened bone.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's just the shape that's coming up. Yep. So these ossification centers, this time what we have is we have our cartilage blueprint. Do you happen to remember which cartilage? Because we have elastic cartilage, fiber cartilage, hyaline. The hyaline cartilage. Because when the newborn gets here, like we said, the majority is cartilage, which is allowing for passage through the birth canal and then the ability to grow and develop. But what has begun to take place in utero, all right, this right here, what kind of bone is that reminding you of? What kind of, which of those bones over there on it does it make you think about? Kind of going to have this long piece to it in the middle with some ends on it. All right, makes me think about something such as my femur, my tibia, my fibula, my ulna, my radius, my humerus. Okay? Can you kind of see that now? So before we got this right here that we see, okay, it was mostly cartilage. But now we end up with this structure that has our compact bone with the spongy bone to the inside. Is everybody kind of with me now? So my cartilage is my blueprint. So in early development, all right, because we said what, 4 to 5 weeks? Okay, we've already got the cartilage present that is showing centers of ossification. Now here's what happens. Cartilage was the very first thing to form for that skeleton. And do you guys remember cartilage has the connective tissue wrapping? Do you all remember the connective tissue wrapping? And in this case, when we talk about cartilage, chondro is our term to let us know that, right? Is everybody with me? And then peri tells me what? Around. So my cartilage that is serving as the model has that connective tissue wrapping, the perichondrium. All right, is everybody kind of with me right now? Okay,